This is the powerful story of Muhammad Ali refusing a championship belt after a pivotal fight, shocking the boxing world and revealing deeper principles that defined the legendary boxer beyond his athletic achievements. Set in the cultural and historical context of America during the civil rights era, the narrative explores Ali's convictions, the people who influenced his decision, and the lasting impact of this moment on his legacy and those who witnessed it. The arena lights blazed down on the canvas, casting long shadows across the ring where two men had just battled for 21 minutes and 37 seconds. The crowd's roar was deafening, a wall of sound that seemed to physically press against Muhammad Ali's sweat-soaked skin as the referee raised his gloved hand in victory. Madison Square Garden, New York City, 1967. A coliseum of modern times where gladiators came to write their names in history. Ali stood tall despite the exhaustion that threatened to buckle his knees. His chest heaved with each breath, but his eyes remained clear, focused, seeing beyond the immediate chaos around him. The opponent he had just defeated, a formidable fighter whose face now bore the imprints of Ali's legendary speed and precision, slumped against his corner post, his team rushing to attend to him. Cameras flashed like stars exploding, capturing the moment for tomorrow's front pages. Journalists pressed forward against the security barriers, their notepads ready to record whatever the charismatic champion might declare. They knew Ali never disappointed when it came to quotable moments. The Louisville Lip, they called him, always ready with words as sharp as his punches. But something was different tonight. Those who knew Ali best could see it in the set of his shoulders, the unusual quietness that had settled over him even as his victory was announced. His trainer, Angelo Dundee, approached cautiously, a towel in hand to wipe the champion's face. "You all right, champ?" Dundee whispered, concern evident in his voice. Ali nodded once, a barely perceptible movement. "Get Herbert here," he said quietly, "and Malcolm's widow. They need to be here for what comes next." Confusion flickered across Dundee's weathered face, but he didn't question Ali. After years of working with the most unpredictable talent in boxing history, he knew when Ali had made up his mind about something. The Boxing Commission president approached, the gleaming championship belt held reverently in his hands. The gold caught the arena lights, throwing dazzling reflections across the ring. This was the moment every boxer dreamed of, the culmination of sacrifice, pain, and relentless pursuit of greatness. "Good ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, "please remain standing for the presentation of the World Heavyweight Championship belt to our winner, Muhammad Ali." The crowd's cheers intensified, but Ali raised his hand, signaling for silence. Gradually, the noise diminished until an unusual hush fell over Madison Square Garden. 20,000 people held their breath, sensing that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Ali stepped forward, looking directly at the commission president. His voice, when he spoke, carried clearly through the arena without need of a microphone. "I cannot accept this belt tonight." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Reporters scrambled for their cameras and notepads. The commission president stood frozen, the belt still extended in his hands, his expression one of complete bewilderment. "Mr. Ali," he began, his voice strained, "this is most irregular. There are children in Mississippi who can't afford to eat today," Ali continued, his voice gaining strength. "There are young men dying in Vietnam for a cause they don't understand. There are people fighting for basic dignity on the streets of this very city. Until those battles are won, this," he gestured to the belt, "is just metal and leather." The silence that followed was absolute. In that moment, Muhammad Ali transcended his role as a boxer and stepped fully into his identity as something far more powerful, a voice for those who had none. In the front row, Howard Cosell, The famous sports broadcaster who had defended Ali when others condemned him, nodded slowly, a rare smile of genuine respect on his face. He knew he was witnessing a moment that would be discussed not just in sports columns, but in history books. If this story has made you feel something already, however small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. As Ali turned away from the belt, the crowd remained silent, stunned by what they had just witnessed. But in that silence, something profound was happening. Minds were opening, perspectives shifting. A boxer had just delivered a knockout blow not with his fists, but with his conscience. In the locker room afterward, reporters pressed against each other, shouting questions. Ali sat calmly on a bench, his hands now unwrapped, looking smaller somehow without the gloves that had made him famous. "Why, champ? Why refuse the belt?" one reporter called out above the others. Ali looked up, his eyes finding the questioner with unsettling precision. Because some fights happen in the ring," he said quietly, "but the fights that matter most happen outside it." 3 weeks before the fight, Muhammad Ali sat in a modest apartment in Harlem, surrounded by books. The shelves lining the walls held volumes on philosophy, religion, civil rights, and history. This was Ali's sanctuary, a place far removed from the glaring spotlight that followed him everywhere else. Here, with a small circle of trusted friends and advisors, the public persona fell away, revealing a man deeply troubled by the state of the world around him. Herbert Muhammad, son of Elijah Muhammad and Ali's manager, placed a newspaper on the table. The headline screamed about another bombing in a black church in Alabama, 4 more children dead, no suspects. "They're killing our babies while the government looks the other way," Ali said, his voice heavy with a weariness that had nothing to do with physical training. "They expect me to represent this country, to be grateful for the opportunity, to smile and dance for their entertainment." Betty Shabazz, widow of Malcolm X, sat quietly in the corner, her dignified presence a reminder of how high the stakes could be for those who dared to speak truth to power. Her husband had paid the ultimate price just 2 years earlier, gunned down while preparing to address the Organization of Afro-American Unity. "Malcolm would say that your platform gives you responsibility," she said finally. "The question is not whether to use it, but how." Ali nodded, his respect for her wisdom evident. The death of Malcolm X had hit him hard, harder than any punch he'd taken in the ring. They had been close, with Malcolm guiding Ali's early steps in the Nation of Islam. Their subsequent falling out after Ali sided with Elijah Muhammad over Malcolm was something that still haunted the boxer. "I've been thinking about the championship belt," Ali said after a long silence, "about what it represents and to whom." Jim Brown, the legendary football player who had retired at the peak of his career to pursue civil rights activism and acting, leaned forward. "What are you planning, Muhammad?" Ali looked around the room at the small gathering of those he trusted most, people who understood that his fights extended far beyond the boxing ring. These were individuals who had risked their own comfort, safety, and careers to stand for something larger than themselves. "Something that will make them really hear me," Ali replied. "And not just the words, but the meaning behind them." The next day, Ali visited a community center in Bedford-Stuyvesant, one of the many neighborhoods he quietly supported with both his time and money. Children swarmed around him, their faces lighting up at the presence of the man whose pictures adorned their bedroom walls. Ali moved among them with genuine warmth, learning names, asking about school, performing magic tricks that delighted them. Later, in a back office with the center's director, Ali wrote a check that would keep the center's lunch program running for another year. "You don't have to do this, champ," the director said. "You've already done so much." Ali shook his head. "A man who has been blessed with much has much to give," he said, "and a platform that only serves itself is worthless." As he left the center, A young boy no more than 10 years old ran up to him. "Mr. Ali," the boy said earnestly, "my daddy says you're going to lose your title if you keep talking about the war and stuff. He says you should just box and be quiet." Ali crouched down to meet the boy at eye level. "What's your name, young man?" "Terence," the boy replied. "Well, Terence, let me ask you something. What good is a title if you have to sell your soul to keep it? Some things are worth more than gold belts and fame. Someday you'll understand that." The boy nodded solemnly, not fully comprehending but somehow sensing the importance of the moment. Standing up, Ali looked around at the neighborhood, at the dilapidated buildings, the broken windows, the evidence of systemic neglect. Then he looked back at the children playing in the community center's small yard, their laughter a defiant soundtrack against the backdrop of poverty. In that moment, his decision crystallized. The championship belt meant nothing if it couldn't be used as a tool for real change. It was just another trinket in a world that valued trinkets over truth. And Muhammad Ali had always been about truth, even when it cost him everything. The training for the upcoming fight continued with its usual intensity, but those closest to Ali noticed a new dimension to his focus. He was preparing not just for a boxing match, but for a moment of moral reckoning that would test his courage in ways no opponent ever could. The day of the fight arrived with the electric anticipation that always surrounded Ali's appearances. Ticket scalpers outside Madison Square Garden commanded astronomical prices. Celebrities and dignitaries filled the premium seats. The energy in the arena was palpable, a living thing that hummed and pulsed with excitement. Backstage, Ali sat quietly, a stark contrast to his usual pre-fight theatrics. There were no poems today, no predictions about which round his opponent would fall. Just a man in deep contemplation, preparing himself for something far more daunting than physical combat. Angelo Dundee worked silently, wrapping Ali's hands with the practiced precision of a man who had performed this ritual hundreds of times. He sensed the unusual mood, but knew better than to disrupt Ali's mental preparation. "You seem different today, champ," Dundee said finally, securing the tape on Ali's left hand. Ali looked up, his eyes clear and focused. "Today isn't just about boxing, Angie. It's about standing for something." Dundee nodded, understanding passing between them. "Whatever you're planning, I'm with you. Always have been." Ali smiled then, some of his familiar spark returning. "I know, old friend. That's why you're in my corner." When Ali entered the arena, the crowd erupted as it always did. He moved down the aisle with his characteristic grace, acknowledging the cheers, but without the usual showmanship. Those who had followed his career closely noticed the difference immediately. Howard Cosell, from his broadcast position, remarked on it to his viewers. "There's something different about Ali tonight," Cosell said into his microphone. "A seriousness we don't typically see before his bouts. One wonders what's going through the mind of the most controversial champion in boxing history." The fight itself was vintage Ali. The floating, the stinging, the psychological warfare conducted with gloves and footwork. His opponent was formidable, landing several punishing blows that tested Ali's legendary resilience. But Ali's focus never wavered. Round after round, he executed his strategy with precision, gradually wearing down his challenger with superior speed and technique. In the corner between rounds, Dundee noticed that Ali barely heard his tactical advice. The champion nodded mechanically, his mind seemingly elsewhere despite the intensity of the contest. "Stay with me, champ," Dundee urged after the 8th round, applying cold metal to a swelling under Ali's eye. "I need you here, now." Ali's focus snapped back. "I'm here, Angie, and I'm going to finish this in the next round. Not for the belt, but for what comes after." True to his word, Ali came out for the 9th round with renewed purpose. His combinations flowed with devastating precision, each punch finding its mark with uncanny accuracy. His opponent, already fatigued from the relentless pressure of the previous rounds, could no longer mount an effective defense. With 30 seconds left in the round, a lightning-fast combination sent him to the canvas for the final time. As the referee counted to 10, Ali didn't celebrate. He simply walked to a neutral corner and waited, his chest heaving from exertion, but his expression solemn. The crowd, sensing that they were witnessing something unusual, quieted their celebration, an expectant hush falling over the arena. What happened next? Ali's refusal of the championship belt sent shockwaves through the sports world and beyond. As he had planned in those quiet meetings weeks before, he used the moment of his greatest triumph to shine a light on issues far larger than boxing. In the press conference that followed, reporters fired questions at him like machine gun rounds. Are you making a political statement, Ali? Is this a protest against the Vietnam War? Are you renouncing your title? Ali raised his hands for quiet. When he spoke, his voice was steady and clear. I'm not renouncing anything that I've earned with my sweat and blood, he said, but I am asking everyone in this room and everyone watching to think about what we truly value. Is it gold and titles? Or is it justice, dignity, and the right of every child, regardless of color, to grow up with hope and opportunity? A reporter from a major newspaper stood up. Some would say you're being unpatriotic, that you're disrespecting the sport that made you famous. Ali's eyes flashed with the fire that those who knew him recognized as righteous indignation. Patriotism isn't blind loyalty. It's working to make your country live up to its highest ideals. And as for boxing, I respect this sport enough to use the platform it's given me for something meaningful. As the press conference continued, something remarkable happened. The questions began to shift from accusations to genuine inquiries about the issues Ali was raising. Reporters who had come expecting a standard post-fight boasting session found themselves engaged in a discussion about civil rights, economic inequality, and the moral questions surrounding the Vietnam War. Outside the garden, as news of Ali's actions spread, crowds began to gather. Some were supporters, carrying hastily made signs praising his stand. Others were critics, angry at what they perceived as disrespect to American institutions. Police formed lines between the groups, tense but maintaining order. Ali, slipping out through a side entrance to avoid the crowds, caught sight of a young black boy watching from across the street. Their eyes met briefly, and Ali saw in the child's expression something that made all the controversy worthwhile, a dawning recognition that principles sometimes mattered more than prizes, that a man could be great not just for what he achieved, but for what he refused to accept when acceptance would compromise his soul. The days following Ali's refusal of the belt unleashed a storm of controversy that extended far beyond the sports world. Newspaper editorials across the country debated his actions. Television commentators analyzed his motives. In barbershops, diners, living rooms, and college campuses, Muhammad Ali became the center of heated discussions about patriotism, protest, and the responsibilities of public figures. The Boxing Commission threatened to strip him of his title officially. Sponsors cancelled contracts worth millions. Hate mail poured in by the bagful. But for every voice raised in condemnation, another spoke in support. Civil rights leaders praised his courage. Anti-war activists embraced him as a powerful ally. Young people, particularly, responded to his willingness to sacrifice personal gain for principle. 1 week after the fight, Ali sat in his manager's office as Herbert Muhammad read him excerpts from the day's newspapers. The Chicago Tribune says you've tarnished the noble art of boxing with political theatrics, Herbert said, setting the paper aside. The New York Amsterdam News calls you a beacon of moral courage in an age of compromise. Ali nodded thoughtfully. And the people? What are they saying? Herbert smiled. They're talking, Muhammad. Everywhere, they're talking. About things that matter. That afternoon, Ali received a visitor he hadn't expected, the opponent he had defeated. The man entered Ali's training gym hesitantly, still bearing the facial bruises from their encounter. "I came to say something," he said when they were alone. Ali waited, curious but respectful. "I didn't understand what you did at first," the fighter continued. "Thought you were just looking for attention, another way to make headlines. But my daughter asked me about it. She's 12. She wanted to know if you were right, if there are things more important than winning." He paused, emotion making his voice rough. "I didn't know what to tell her. Been thinking about it ever since." Ali placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "And what did you decide?" "That I want to be able to look my daughter in the eye and tell her I stood for something too." He extended his hand. "Thank you for the lesson. It was worth the beating." The men shook hands, a moment of understanding passing between them that transcended their roles as opponents. 2 months later, Ali stood on the steps of a newly renovated community center in Harlem. The funds that would have gone toward promoting his championship belt and the accompanying celebrations had been redirected here instead. Children from the neighborhood gathered around as he prepared to cut the ribbon on the building that would offer educational programs, meals, medical checkups, and a safe haven. Among the crowd, Ali spotted familiar faces: Betty Shabazz, Jim Brown, Howard Cosell, and many others who had supported his stand. But it was the unfamiliar faces that moved him most, the ordinary people who had come to witness something hopeful in a time of turmoil. As Ali addressed the gathering, his words were not about boxing or belts or championships. They were about community, responsibility, and the fight that continued outside the ring, the fight for justice and dignity that required everyone's participation. "Some people ask me if I regret giving up that belt," he said, looking out over the sea of faces. "They don't understand that I didn't give up anything of real value. What good is a symbol if it doesn't stand for something meaningful? What I gained, what we all gain when we stand on principle, is worth more than gold or titles." He gestured to the center behind him. "This is a real championship. These children having a place to learn and grow and dream, that's worth fighting for, and it's a fight that needs all of us, not just one man in boxing gloves." As he cut the ribbon, the crowd erupted in cheers. Children released colorful balloons into the sky, a moment of joy in a neighborhood that had seen too little of it. Later, as Ali prepared to leave, a woman approached him with her son. "My boy wants to be like you when he grows up," she said. Ali crouched down to the child's level. "You want to be a boxer?" The boy shook his head. "I want to be brave," he said simply. Ali felt something catch in his throat. In that moment, he understood the true impact of his decision, not measured in newspaper headlines or historical footnotes, but in the hearts and minds of those who witnessed a man choose conscience over convenience, principle over profit. Years later, long after Ali had fought his last bout, the story of the belt he refused would be told and retold. It would become part of the complex legacy of a man who was much more than a boxer, a man whose greatest fights had nothing to do with his legendary fists. In museums where his memorabilia was displayed, there was always a space, an empty place where that particular belt would have been. But far from representing something missing, that space stood as a powerful symbol of something found, a moment when Muhammad Ali, the greatest fighter of his generation, proved that some victories aren't measured in gold and leather, but in the courage to stand alone when standing alone is the only right thing to do. If you've made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing. I tell these stories with my heart in my hand to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who truly live. If this touched you, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.